Hello, this is the quick start video to get you up and running with the simple 360-degree sphere capture tool. So what I have here is a simple house level, and inside this level I have the kind of typical setup of a camera camera flying through the house. So this would be one of the stereotypical use cases for this kind of tool. So most of the times you will probably be using it in the kind of level like this one, where you just need to make simple walkthrough. So I think this is one of the best simple use cases I could choose. So all you really need to do is, once you download the tool, just go to your content folder, the simple 360 sphere capture subfolder, and just drag the tool into the level. It should look like this, kind of gizmo of 6 cameras. And all you really need to do is to make sure it's parented on the same thing that your regular camera is. Or if you don't have any camera, you want to use it from scratch, then just make sure that you use this thing as your actual camera. In this case, I already have an existing camera, so I'm just gonna add it to the sequencer, and then I'm gonna parent it to the camera rail, and I'm gonna zero the location and rotation out. So right now I'm seeing that it's moving along with my camera. And once this is done, the animation part, all I really need to do, and this is important, just click add track and add a capture track. This is gonna be telling the tool when to start and when to stop the capturing of the file sequence, of the image sequence. So just as a good measure, I'm gonna go before my start frame and add a keyframe where the capture is disabled. Then I'm going to go to my start frame, add another keyframe, and enable the capture. And one more thing, I need to make sure I will be stopping the capture. So I go to my end frame and add yet another keyframe and just turn the capture off. And this is all that you really need to do in order to set up the capture. Then you just need to choose the file name, so let's say house, choose the resolution, let's do 2K, choose if you want to save it as a low dynamic range image or as an HDR image. That's probably dependent on if you want to do some sort of post-processing on it or not. In this case, I'm not going to do any post-processing, so I'm just going to use low dynamic range JPEG sequence. And here you can override the first frame number, so when it's saving the file sequence, it can start from an offset from frame number. It doesn't have to always start from 0. So once this is all set up, all I need to do is choose my save path and just select folder. That's it. Then I will go to render the movie, and this is important. We are using our custom file output. This stuff here will be ignored. So a good practice, if you don't intend to render also some sort of 2D camera or like a regular orthogonal camera, and you want just the 360 output, what I do is I set the resolution to some really small resolution like this one. I will set compression quality all the way to 1. I will use the same folder as the one for my image sequence output, and I will override this to a static name, just temp in my case, the file name format. And here in advanced settings, I will check override existing. What this will do, this combination of the parameters, is it will always create one single really tiny temporary file, and in subsequent renderings of this image sequence, it will always override the same file, so it won't be incrementally adding more and more files to your folder. So there will be always always just this one small temporary file which you don't really need to care about, or you can delete afterwards. So this is all set up, and all we need to do at this point is just click Capture Movie, save selected, and we can see in our capture folder the images, 2K images in my case, are quickly appearing. You can see the performance is really acceptable because we are rendering about 300 frames and just a few seconds in, and we have already about half of them rendered in 2K resolution on my GTX 1080 Ti. And once this is rendered, which should take just a minute, you can see the temporary file here. It's almost rendered. There we go, it's done. And you can see the temporary file is this really ugly, low quality placeholder, but it takes only 660 kilobytes. And if you render again, it won't create a new file, it will override this one. So this is the best kind of approach to deal with outputting, to deal with output of the actual Unreal's render movie dialog. So once this is rendered, our sequence, I'm gonna drag and drop it in my image sequence player. And you can start to see these kind of blurry seams. So this tool uses the typical 6 individual camera cube setup. However, to cover these seams, it actually does overscan. It renders a bit larger images, and then it smoothly blends them together. And this is sufficient to cover most of the low radius screen space effects, like, for example, ambient occlusion or bloom. However, in this case, there is one large-scale screen space effect, and that is camera exposure, which is automatic. So for each individual camera, the exposure is evaluated individually. So what we need to do to fix that is actually just go here, select our post-process volume, probably the outbound global one you have in your scene. And here, let's override the exposure to manual. And let's find the exposure compensation value that works for us. So let's say 13, for example. Yeah, that looks great. So now there won't be any exposure variation across the individual projection cameras, and it should look all nice. So again, all I need to do now is click the capture movie again, and it will be updating those existing files, and it won't be creating any new file from the Unreal's render movie dialog, so it will just override this one. So you can quickly iterate, you don't have to spend much time worrying about the file output. So let's give it a few seconds. We are almost halfway through. And we're done. Again, this file was just overwritten. And let's drag in the new sequence. And you can see that most of those seams are gone and our sequence is rendered. And everything works perfectly. The motion blur, the anti-aliasing, the post-processing, there's no weirdness when it comes to post-processing. You can still see kind of a little bit of the blurry seam here, because what I'm actually using in this level are the typical screen space reflections. And as you can see, as you probably know, they are calculated in screen space, but I mean the overscan in this case seems to do a relatively good job of covering them up. If you were to use ray tracing, then ray tracing is fully supported by this tool and is not a screen space effect, so those seams should disappear, and you should have better reflection on top of that. But just to show you, you can see the kind of the seam floating here. If I were to disable the screen space reflection as a screen space effect, and just render once more. And just give it a few seconds to re-render. We're again almost halfway through. Almost there. And it's done. Now I have disabled the screen space reflection, and now I am only using the box reflection captures placed around the scene. You can see all the seams are now completely gone. So it's important to be mindful with the screen space effects. This tool tries to help you out by doing the overscan and blur. And for small radius screen space effects, like for example, you can see the bloom here, or like having the glare, or for example, screen space ambient occlusion, it should always do the trick. So yeah, I guess this is it for the usage of this tool. And I hope you found it useful. Thank you.